character education through literature, teaching techniques using stories. Okay, just in case those who weren't here yesterday, allow me to introduce myself again. No? So I am FEROLD, but you can call me RUTCH if you want. That's my nickname. And again, don't ask me how my parents got my nickname. The only thing I know is that I have older brothers who are Butch, Dutch, Hutch, and I guess wala nang mahanap na letter yung parents ko, so letter R na lang ako, RUTCH, okay? And I have been teaching for 32 years. This is my 32nd year of teaching, and all of those years in the PAREF system. 27 years at PAREF Southridge School and 5 years at Northfield School. And in fact, 2.5 years of those at PAREF Northfield QC, Quezon City, were face-to-face, and then 1.5 years online, and then this year we are online again. But my dear teachers, I forgot to tell you this yesterday. Our school in Quezon City actually closed down already. Okay, so we are now part of Northfield Antipolo, PAREF Northfield Antipolo. It's sad but true, but we are one of those schools that closed down during the pandemic. But just the same, it should not stop us from learning today. Okay, our topic this afternoon is character education through literature, teaching techniques using stories. Okay, I'd like to begin by talking about character education. When I was young, I remember my parents would always remind me na anak, siguraduhin mong galingan mo, no? Galingan mo sa school. Okay, and then they would always follow it up with anak, galingan mo pero magpakabait ka. Okay, magpakabait ka. And that's very interesting because years later when I taught in Southridge, and then we have this mission vision, and then I saw that we have to keep a balance between academic formation and personal formation. Then I realized, wait, right from the start, no, tinuro na sa akin ito ng magulang ko. And I think it's true to all of us. Okay, character education, in fact, starts at home, and that's what we believe in the PAREF system. And because of that, we realize now, okay, so character education, there has to be character education. In fact, for me, in all schools, there should be character education in all schools. But then, in this seminar, we're going to talk about character education through literature. Okay, the simplest definition I can give you with regard to literature would be any written work. In fact, some articles that I have read, they talk about the books that are timeless, the classics. They refer to that as literature. Kaya lang, my question now is, maybe some of you may be asking that question, sir, paano yan? Hindi naman ako nagtuturo ng literature. So how can I teach character education when you're talking about literature? Don't worry, my dear teachers, because we are going to teach you techniques using stories through literature. When we speak of this aspect, okay, we are talking about a connection of a series of events, that are told through the following. Okay, again, I'll repeat. A connection or series of events that are told through the following. Number one, words. Okay, and these words can be written or spoken. Number two, we could also talk about imagery. Okay, and when we speak of imagery, it could be the still images like a painting or the moving images like the movies. We can also talk about body language, poetry in motion, music, the songs, the arts, okay, and other forms of communication. Kaya my dear teachers, fear not, be not afraid. Kasi yung pala yun, sir. So this afternoon, we're not just going to talk about teachers who teach literature, because those teachers who teach literature, alam na nila, meron na silang mga materials, in order for them to teach character education. They already have chosen the books maybe, or stuff like that. Pero tayo, we are going to learn more, okay, about how to teach character education in the other media, okay, other forms of media. So that could be movies, songs, okay, and so forth and so on. That is why, looking back, we were told, when I taught in Southridge, we were told that all teachers should be formators. Okay, that alone would actually tell us that character education is not just limited to just the English teachers, the Filipino teachers, or maybe the literature teachers. Okay, because all of us, we were told that you have to be formators. And because of that, since we are formators, I actually believe na virtues are caught and taught. Okay? For me, virtues are caught and taught. Okay, that's why we have virtue talks in Southridge and even in Northfield, because you teach and at the same time you also catch, especially if you are a teacher whom they idolize. Okay, that is why ingat na ingat tayo sa ganyan, di ba? Na pag ina-idolize tayo ng mga teachers, pag nakikita ng mga students, and then little do we know na ginagaya na tayo sa karamihang bagay, lalo na sa ating actions, the way we talk, no? The way we act. That's why we have to be very careful. Kaya nga, we have to be formators. In other words, in everything that we do, we have to make sure that we show them that we are formators in our actions. I remember tuloy, no, when segue muna ako ng konti. I remember when I was teaching in Southridge, I had a co-teacher who was a graduate of Southridge, and his former teachers are still teaching at the time in Southridge. And the funny thing is, every time we see him, okay, the way he acts, the way he talks, and then like when he talks like aya, like that, no? And then we look at the teachers and wait, kuhang-kuha mo, no? Na-capture mo yung actuations ng teacher. And amazing, no? Amazing kasi na-idolize niya talaga yung teacher na yon. That's why we have to be very careful, because everything that we do, everything that we say, the way we act, the way we talk, the way we dress, by the way, that's included, maaring gayahin nila. Okay? Careful lang tayo kasi baka mamaya yung mga female teachers gayahin ng mga boys, no? We just have to be careful on that one. So therefore, what am I trying to point out here, my dear teachers? I'm trying to point out that tayo ang magdadala nito. Tayo magdadala. Okay? And every time I tell my student council officers and my mentees and the MDC officers, I always tell them na pag tayo magdadala nito, let us make this happen. So I'm going to use the same tagline here in our talk for this afternoon. My dear teachers, let us make this happen. So I hope after the seminar, when you all go to your respective schools, I hope you get to practice things that you have captured in this seminar. Okay, so that's just the beginning of our seminar talk this afternoon. So again, let's make this clear, let's make it happen, and you are the one that will make this happen. So let's start. Let me now show you the first slide. Again, my talk will be divided into several parts, and every time we go to that second or third or fourth part, I will tell you that we are on that part. Let me begin by showing you this slide. Okay, this is according to C.S. Lewis. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis is the author of the Chronicles of Narnia. And he has a book which is entitled The Four Loves, no? The Four Loves. And it's kind of deep. It actually looks easy, but it's kind of deep. But what does he tell us about literature? He says, we read to know we are not alone. What does he mean by that? We read to know we are not alone. Okay, he tells us that we have the power to understand and to make sure that we relate to a fictional character that has been created by an author. So in other words, what C.S. Lewis is telling us na, okay, when we read, we are not alone because we can relate and we can connect to specific characters in that book that we are actually reading. Kaya ang ganda. Kasi di ba, we are like there because we can connect to it. That's why it's important that we actually read. And then we can actually cascade this information to our own students para malaman nila na, hey, why do we need to read, sir, ma'am? Ba't kailangan namin magbasa? Hey, simple. Because we are not alone when we read. Because we're able to connect to these characters. They may be fictional, but we are able to connect to them and understand and relate to them. Okay, so it's very important that we begin with this statement. Now, let me now follow it up with this. So therefore, literature is a powerful way of teaching character and values. The big question is, if it's powerful, okay, it's a powerful way of teaching character and values. My next question is this: how exposed are we to literature? Kasi kung i-expose natin yung mga students natin sa literature, we have to be exposed ourselves. But remember, I connected it to several media kanina. It could be spoken words, it could be written works, it could be movies, it could be art, and so forth and so on. You know, I'm reminded when I taught in Southridge, I believe it or not, you may not believe this, but that was the first time that I was exposed to the musicals. Okay? First time I was exposed to Les Miserables. First time I was exposed to Phantom of the Opera. First time I was exposed to the other musicals like Cats. And I was what? I was 20 plus years old. And yet I had to accept it because that was part of becoming a cultured man. That was part of my becoming a cultured person. And I'm very thankful for Southridge because of that experience that I had, because I got to know this musical, beautiful. I got to read the book, I got to watch the movie, I got to listen to the songs, and beautiful, beautiful songs of this musical. That is why we have to learn to expose ourselves. And if your school does not actually expose you to these types of literature, then we have that obligation to do it ourselves, my dear teachers. Huwag tayo matakot. And then get to know, get to talk to other teachers and tell them, ano ba yung pwede naming mapanood or mabasa? Okay, those things, because we need each other's help. That is why it's important. Kasi, baka naman mas expose pa yung mga estudyante natin sa atin. Okay? Because when we expose them to a certain, let's say, story, and then tell you, ma'am, sir, luma na yan eh. Tagal ko nang alam yan. That is why we need to upgrade ourselves. Okay? So that the next slide, we will be able to connect with our students or maybe even expose them, and so that they can learn something new, okay, to us. And this is what the master teacher did. And I guess all of us know who the master teacher I am referring to. Okay? And what did he do? He told stories. What kind of stories did he tell us? Kind of the stories that we actually were told and learned from him. These stories are what we call parables. Because we all know that. Mark chapter 4, verse 2 says he taught them many things in parables. And we also know what parables are. These are stories in which there is a learning that happens at the end, or a moral lesson or a lesson that we learn at the end of the story. And those are what parables are. Are we exposed to these parables? Of course, you will say, oh yes, of course, Mr. Rensha, I know a lot of the parables. Okay, but are students exposed to them? Oh yes, Mr. Rensha, they're exposed to them. They know those parables already. Okay, but let me share this with you. Okay. Mark chapter 4, verse 33 tells us that with many such parables, he spoke the word to them. There is a characteristic of the parables which we call similitude. Okay, some of you may have heard it, and similitude actually tells us that there is a similarity, okay, that takes place between the story and in our own lives. And that is what we can do to teach character education to our students. Pero Mr. Ransha, alam na nila yung mga kwento na yan. It doesn't matter if they know the story. What is important is that how can we apply that story in our own classroom? I hope you realize that teachers. It's important for us to realize na how can we apply that story in our own classroom. Sige, alam nila yung kwento, pero I doubt, no? Baka some of them actually do not know the stories. Okay? But we have to apply it in order for us to be able to teach character education. Kasi yun naman ang focus natin. So it doesn't matter if they know the story, but let's see if they can actually relate it and connect it to our own class. Like, for example, there is actually a Easter egg hidden there. Okay, Mark chapter 4, verse 34. Okay, so let us read. Sorry. Okay. It says, he did not speak to them without a parable. Now, the Easter egg that's hidden behind it is actually the parable of the fishing net. Okay? Some of us may be aware of what the parable is about. It talks about the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, wherein the apostles are fishers of man, and those who listen to the word of God become part of the kingdom of God. Now remember, talks about the apostles as fishers of man and of men. And when you speak of the apostles, think of yourself as the apostle, and your students are the fish in the ocean. And they are the ones who belong to your classroom, and your classroom is the ocean. And they are supposed to be the fish. and talk about apostolate work. Because as apostles, you have to bring them to the kingdom of heaven. And that is the connection now. And you can now talk to them about that. And it doesn't matter. So we know the story, yes, but let's connect it to our class. And that is where you start teaching them character education. Because you are now telling them, look, you are aware of what apostolate, the word apostolate means? Okay, do you know what it means? Okay, apostolate work is bringing everyone, no, to the kingdom of heaven. And you as a teacher should be the lead apostle to be able to bring them there, and you connect it to the story. In the process, they are learning, oo nga pala, no, ma'am, sir, totoo nga pala. Sige, oo, so we can connect now the parables to our own situation. Okay, that's the first one. I only actually chose like 3 parables which we can use in order, but you can actually go through all the other parables which you can connect to your own classes or to your own lesson. Second one is the parable of the mustard seed. Okay, in Matthew chapter 22, verse 1, and again, Jesus spoke to them in parables. And we are talking about the mustard seed. And you can see the Easter egg there behind. Those are mustard seed. Now you see how small they are, but they grow into huge trees. That's why we compare the parable of the mustard seed to that of our faith, which starts small, but it becomes big, and we become members of the kingdom of heaven again. Hey, what does that got to do with our class, sir? Anong mga sinasabi mo dyan? Because remember, our class, the beginning of the year, we may not be very close to each other, but we can become stronger, and we will become like the mustard seed that became a tree because we have bonded together strongly. So ganon. No? O nga no, sir. So again, no, the character education, we have to work on this together. We'll start small, but we have to achieve big at the end of the school year. So meron kayong mga goals, planning, and so forth and so on. Yun, kasama nyo na, kinonect nyo na doon sa story ng mustard seed. Okay? And the third one, the last one, which I'd like to share with you, Matthew 13, chapter 34 says, all this Jesus said to the crowds in parables. Indeed, he said nothing to them without a parable. So what is that hidden behind, the Easter egg behind what Matthew chapter 13, verse 34 said? That's actually the parable of the prodigal son. Eh, ma'am, sir, luma na po yan. Alam na po namin yan. Okay, sige, alam niyo naman pala. So tell us the story. Okay, and then let's tell us what you have learned from that story. You know, when I was young, I thought the word prodigal actually means someone who asks for forgiveness, who turns away from sin and goes back to God. Until I got older and I realized that prodigal actually means wasteful, extravagant. Okay. And then, of course, your students will say, sir, you know, this prodigal son left, got his money, the money that he was supposed to be, and it was supposed to be an inheritance, and he leaves and he goes to other country and he comes back with nothing and he asks for forgiveness from his father. But wait, we're forgetting the third character in the prodigal son story, who happens to be the older brother. And sir, what about the older brother? Ma'am, sir, bakit? Ano ba yung importante ba yung older brother? Oh yes, kasi hindi naman siya nilagay doon sa parable if it's not important. But many of us, I guess, have been oriented to the story of the prodigal son without looking at the importance of the older brother. There's an article that I read that actually says that the older brother is a good kid. He's the good kid, while the other one is the prodigal kid, the prodigal son and the good son. And they are comparing both, no? And then we know what happened to the old brother, no, the older brother. He said something like, why are you giving a celebration to my younger brother when in fact I was here the whole time? I told the soil, I was with you when you needed me, and all along I was there. Bakit walang celebration? What did the father say, you know? Well, exactly, you've been here all along while your brother was lost and he is found. What does that tell you? It talks to you about the heart. If you are really a kind person, you have to look into your own heart because you are already here. It's like telling the older brother, nandito ka na sa heaven. So ano pang kinaiinggitan mo? Kaya hindi na wala kailangan mag-celebrate kasi nandito ka na. Okay? And do the students know that? Are they exposed to that? Na meron palang good kid, okay? And that in your classroom, you have your good kids with you. And you will have your prodigal sons with you there that you have to take good care of. And this is a learning experience on your part because you have to realize that, hey, o nga, no, meron ako mga estudyante na hindi ko kayang masyadong pasaway. Okay, may mga students ako na talagang mababait. Of course, yung mga mababait will be your gems. Pero yung mga pasaway, you have to bring them back to your classroom. And they will become your gems as well. And that is the learning from this story. And I hope this is something that you can share with your students because the parables are an important part of teaching character education or character formation to our students. Okay? And I hope with this, we can actually look into other parables that we could use. Like, for example, the parable of the talents. Oh, wow. When you start talking to them about the parable of the talents, give it as a performance task and tell them that, hey, you cannot be the first servant who just kept his talent because thinking that the master will get mad if I'm going to use this talent, while the other two doubled it, tripled it. Okay, of course, we have to tell them you have to be the number 2 or number 3 servant because you have to make good use of your talents. Now, question is, what are your talents? Show us your talent via a video or something to that effect, which I actually did in my own subject in personal development. When we talked about the talents, we talked about the parable, we connected it, and it becomes an education again in character formation. Di ba ang ganda, my dear teachers? No, na, parang, no, parang ang dami palang ways wherein we can teach character education through stories. That is why the next slide that I will show you has to do with other stories, which we call the fables. Okay, in Filipino, of course, we call this the pabula, and the parables are called parabola. Okay, wait, I will not answer that phone. Okay, so let me just continue. I hope you don't mind. Okay, so the Aesop's Fable is one story that we actually learned when we were very young. And I'm sure you all are familiar with certain stories like the fox and the crow. The fox and the crow. We've learned of that story before. And it has to do with the fox and the crow. The crow seeing this piece of cheese, takes a bite of it, he bites it up and brings it up, and the fox sees the crow with the cheese and he's very hungry and he wanted a piece of it, but he couldn't because he tried to let the crow speak, but then later on he flatters the crow, saying na, oh, look, I think you are a good singer, right? Can you sing? And of course the crow was so flattered, said, okay, I'm a good singer, I'll sing. So when the crow starts singing, that's it, he loses the cheese. And what is the lesson that we learn from that? Never succumb to flattery. Okay, never succumb to such flattery. I remember, kasi teachers, I'm not so sure if you're aware, madalas tayong pina-flatter ng mga students natin. I remember when I was in college, I had a teacher who was a nun in Spanish. And at that time, I must admit my teachers weren't that very good, except for the last one. No, I will never forget her, Mrs. Cañazares. And I learned Spanish. I learned kahit paano the basics in Spanish. Then this nun, the sister, she would give us quizzes, etc. And then I would tell her, ma, sister, no, you told us the walang quiz. And sister, ang ganda niyo today. No? And then, oh, ganun ba talaga? O sige, wala na ngang quiz. No? And sometimes it happens to us. But if that happens to us, when your students start doing that, wag kayong padadala. Pardon me, teachers. I saw this viral video of this teacher who started dancing. And she went viral. And kasi binidyo siya ng mga students niya when the students teased her, no, ma'am, sayaw naman kayo, sayaw naman kayo, sayaw naman kayo. My opinion, teachers, I am not for that. Inuto-uto ka lang ng mga estudyante mo. Of course, some praised her, some did not like it. On my part, it's just my opinion, teachers. Please don't get mad at me. I wasn't for it. Okay? Because that should have been a teachable moment. Nagkaagulo na yung klase mo. Ma'am, sayaw, sayaw, sayaw. Ma'am, sayaw, sayaw, sayaw. Ma'am, sayaw, sayaw, sayaw. I could have done something about it. Guys, nawala na yung discipline nyo. Let me teach you something about flattery. Ganun yung mga teachable moments, gentlemen and ladies. Ladies and gentlemen. Again, pardon, I'm used to male teachers in Northfield. Ladies and male students also. So my dear teachers, yun yung mga teachable moments na pwede nating i-insert kaagad. Turuan natin kaagad sila. Natigil, magsiupo kayo. Okay? Ito yung dapat nating matutunan. Masyado nyo akong fina-flatter. Okay? Hindi dapat. And then tell them the Aesop's Fable. And they learn from it. They learn from it. Okay? So again, let's focus on these stories. The parables, the fables, and you can discover, of course, the fables more on the children, but again, actually, pwede nyo namang i-apply sa higher level. It will all depend on how you teach or how you tell the story. Kasi kung ituturo nyo yung story sa high school na, oh, you know what, my dear students, let's talk about the Aesop's Fable. Okay, I'm telling you, pagtatawanan lang kayo. Ma'am, sir, grade 11 na po kami. Ay, oo nga pala, no? Okay, so pag grade 11 kasi, you have to be more firm. I'm a class advisor of grade 11. When I tell them stories, hindi na pwede yung ganun. I have to tell them, guys, no? Stop your flattery. Let me tell you a story about the Aesop's Fable, the fox and the crow. Ganun. So pwede nyo pa rin ituro yan sa high school. It depends on how you actually tell the story to your students. So very interesting. I hope so far you get to understand, no? or get to see certain techniques that you can use in your respective classes. So let me now proceed to what the experts actually or say, okay, in terms of character education. Okay, are we ready? So as we talk about character education, let's see what the experts would have to say. And let's see if we believe in it or agree to it. Reading has been shown to increase empathy, especially when books are read about people who are different from us. Many of us are familiar with this character on the right. No, he's Oggy. That's the character that this actor played from the movie Wonder. And it's also a book, actually. It was taken from a book before it became a movie. Okay. Now, what is the lesson that we can learn from this? It's important for us to realize the importance of empathy. Bakit? Kasi when the classmates see his face, no, the classmates get scared, the classmates laugh at him, the classmate would tease him, classmates would call him ugly, an alien, and so forth. And what did he do? Of course, he cried when he got home. But then he found a solution. The solution was for him to wear a helmet when he goes to school so people don't see his face. They just see the helmet so people can interact with him. And that's a solution that he did. But we can ask these questions in our lesson regarding this story. You can ask something like, how would you feel if that happened to you? Or how do you think that character felt when that happened to them? I'm sure you know this, but what's important is that they get to feel how this character felt. And that is, again, one way of educating character through by showing empathy and putting themselves in the shoes of that person, because that's what empathy means. We put ourselves in the shoes of that person. And this is also where we learned about the statement that says, between being right and being kind, I choose kind. And what does that tell us? That situations like, for example, when the kids would call him, you're ugly, you look like an alien. May you tell the boy, stop. But it's true. He looks like an alien. Yes, it's true. But between being true and being kind, choose kind. You don't have to say it because you have to be kind and you have to show empathy. Boom. Learning na naman. That's how we can actually teach, okay, our students. And they get to say, okay, so we put ourselves, now what can you do? Read, let them read. Or you can let them watch the movie. Maybe you can watch it together. You can have a movie binge, like what we're going to do, by the way. After my talk, I have a movie binge We call it movie binge with my students from grade 11. Okay? So, but then we will just watch Free Guy, by the way, just for entertainment, para mawala yung stress ng mga bata. Okay, I don't know if you've seen Free Guy kasi wala naman yata yung teachable moment doon. It's just full of fun and entertainment. But then this is something that we can learn from, my dear teachers. And then next, of course, we have teacher books that can be great in terms of empathy builders. Now, of course, this is for the young children, no? You can help your young readers identify the emotions that are visible on the characters' faces. Ito naman yung importante. If you teach in the lower levels, particularly siguro mga preschool, maybe until grade 1, pwede mo pang ipakita yung mga picture books because they can look at the pictures and they see the emotions. What is the importance of this? Well, according to the experts, this is a great way to expand a child's feelings vocabulary beyond mad, sad, and happy. Because they can look at the pictures of, teacher, what is that? What's happening? Oh, this boy is afraid. Now, because of the big bad wolf. What's a big bad wolf? I'm scared, teacher. So, yun yung mga situations na dagdagan na. Hindi lang mad, sad, happy, meron ng afraid. What about this teacher? Oh, she was surprised not to see her grandmother with big eyes, with big teeth. Oh, surprise teacher. Yun. So they are now very good for the little kids because they now start adding up to the vocabulary that they have when it comes to emotion. Yesterday, we talked about the importance of emotions. And this time today, I'm talking about emotions, but in the younger age based on literature, that we can teach them character education. Reading can help children think about problem solving. That is why in the next slide, we can see that a great way to explore values is to ask young readers, how would you solve that problem? Okay, what would you do if you were in the situation? Would you have done the same thing as Oggy? Would you have placed a helmet, okay, so that your face will be covered? Or maybe you would have put on makeup. You know what's very interesting? I think, well, I'm not so sure now, but I think what happened during Halloween in that movie, he didn't have to wear any costume, something like that, no? And anyway, would you have done the same thing? So you ask those questions now. And in the process, the way they answer, that is where you will now listen and process their answers. Kasi pag sabihin nila na, sir, I don't have to. Pangit ako eh. So, pero ayaw ko ng ganon. Make-upan ko na lang sarili ko. Or hindi na lang ako papasok sa school. Yun, maririnig mo yun sa kanila from their own mouths, the values that they have. And that is very good because you are now allowing them to decide and make decisions. And it is not you making decisions for themselves. And it is through this literature that you are able to make them decide on your own and solve the problem. And maybe some of them will argue with each other and say, well, I want to do this. Or maybe you can ask them about the movie Soul, if you have watched it together, and then ask them, how would you have ended the movie? Would you have ended it in the same manner? Like, how did the movie end? Spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie, but I hope you don't mind. The movie ended with Mr. Gardner being allowed to go back to Earth. And one of the counselors that they call them, the counselors who take care of the souls from the great before, told him, what now, Mr. Gardner? And Mr. Gardner said, I don't know, but I just want to live every minute of my life. I just want to live every minute of my life. And that's it. That's it. That's the end. And how would you want to end it? Would you have ended it the same way? If you're going to ask me, of course. But if you're going to ask the student, maybe they have other answers. Okay? And of course, the writer of the movie will have a different answer because he said he actually had a different ending at the end. He wanted 22 to meet with Mr. Gardner. But of course, both of them don't know each other. Because remember, when you are here, when the souls were sent to Earth, okay, it's like zero knowledge. No, you don't know each other. That's why how we wanted to end it. But of course, we can ask our students, what about you? Okay, class number 1, Juan de la Cruz. That's why you're class number 1, because you're 1, De La Cruz. Okay? So you can ask them those questions and help them value, no, find out the values of their answers. And then look at this. Reading to children is a great way to share values that are important to you. Again, these are for the lower levels. Take some time to reflect on your own values. Okay? Because, okay, it's important that when you research and choose books to read to your children that are in line with your values. Okay? So in other words, know your values first before you get to choose which books you want to share with your students. And in the process, they will get to learn from the values that you have to the book, that the values that you transfer your values to these books, and then share that story which has those values to your students. So ganun lang yun, my dear teachers, no? Process, passing it on, and then discuss those values with your children and share why they are important to you. Okay, so valuing, I'm sure you know that, no? But then the important thing is, ganito kasi yung tanong, sir, wala na kasi kaming time mag-value. Kasi you see, I teach science, I teach math, I teach. Unlike literature, nandun talaga yung time ng valuing, di ba? Unlike English, you know, when you have read stories, Filipino, when you read stories, nandun yung valuing. Pero sa math, science, social, wala, sir. Pero I'm sure you've heard of integration. Now you integrate the values that you want the students to have based on your lesson. Okay? I hope you have that in your respective schools. Because in the PAREF schools, we do have that. No, you include in your lesson plan the valuing. I think lahat tayo meron. Just correct me if I'm wrong. But just the same, hindi nyo na kailangan mag-spend ng time to actually, I mean, not spend the time, but spend a full time, no, to discuss it, because you have integrated it. And then you can just discuss it in what, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes at the most. And you're able to discuss it. And in the process, hindi ka lang nagtuturo sa math, nagtuturo ka rin ng values education to your students. Di ba ang ganda, teachers? Kasi ang dami nating pwedeng paraan. Kaya lang, of course, nahihirapan tayo because our reasons would be, sir, gawa lang nga ng lesson plan, ang hirap na eh. Mag-valuing ka pa. Idadagdag mo pa doon sa klase mo. Okay? Pero you don't have to force it, my dear teachers. But what you can do is you can look for the teachable moment and then make the teachable moment happen. As what I said, let's make this happen. And you teachers ang magdadala nito. Okay? And so therefore, reading together can be a relationship builder as children grow up. Very true. Again, the experts are actually trying to say these things, then we can always look for age-appropriate practice. Okay? So hindi naman pwedeng sabihin natin, sir, okay, sige, pwede kaya yan sa high school, sir, I teach grade 12, no? Reading together. Parang hindi na yata applicable yung reading together. Okay, sige, but it's up to you. No, but we are teaching you these things which you can practice in your own respective schools. So allow me to read this. This is very interesting. I don't know if you agree. Once upon a time, long ago and far away, or perhaps not so long ago, teachers did not use fancy PowerPoint presentations, overhead projectors, or even chalkboards. They simply shared their knowledge through stories. Pero mukhang may nakalimutan ako dito sa slide na to. We shared Manila paper. Sino nakaabot ng Manila paper? OMG, napakatanda ko na pala talaga. No? I'm sure many of you, hindi nyo na naabutan Manila paper. What's a Manila paper, sir? Okay, so ang naabutan nyo na siguro, at the most, siguro yung projectors or may overhead projectors. No, because naabutan ko rin yan. Chalkboards, yes. Pati whiteboard, naabutan ko. But then, true, no? The first time I used the overhead projector, nahirapan ako. Tapos, sorry, hindi ako nahirapan, madali. Pero once na nag-malfunction, yung mga overhead projector, doon ako nahirapan. Di ba? Kaya, kasi walang overhead projector, wala nang technology. Paano yan? Okay? So, dinaan ko sa kwento. Buti na lang. I mean, I'm not saying that I told them stories, but I actually just told them stories based on the lesson That I know. So, madali ako nakabawi because of the stories. Okay? Because I know how to tell stories. Okay? Pero tanungin natin sarili natin, maswerte ba tayo? Dahil meron na yung mga gadgets na yan, may equipment? Maswerte ba mga estudyante natin? Because they see everything that we talk about. Okay? Nakikita nila visually. Visually. Okay? Kasi kailangan maging entertainer tayo sa kanila ngayon, di ba? I'm sure you know that. But then, who are luckier? Tayo or sila? Maybe we can ponder upon that. Okay? Ponder upon it, my dear teachers. Okay? Kasi madalas tayong gumamit ng mga ganitong equipment, sanay tayo. Pero paano kung nawala lahat? How can we teach kung face-to-face na tayo? Okay, think about it, my dear teachers. You can answer that, but it doesn't have to be here. You can continue, okay, with this statement. Tell me a fact and I learn. Tell me the truth and I believe. But then tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever. Ito, I think all of you can relate to this because, my dear teachers, you know, I love telling stories, and more often than not, when we have gatherings with my former students, lagi na lang, sir, I remember your story. Sir, I remember. Paano naman yung tinuro ko sa inyo? But I don't really mind. Because even if they forgot the lessons that I taught them, but the stories that they learned from my stories, that's better for me because that's character education. Let me give you a short story. Let me tell you a short story rather. Okay, this happened several years ago. Sa Southridge pa ako noon. And this boy, I won't mention his name. Let's just call him Joaquin. No, let's just call him Joaquin. Okay, Joaquin, I taught him in grade 7 religion. And when he got to grade 12, wala pang grade 12 nung time na yon. When he got to 4th year high school, okay, he was very active. And then one day during the parents get together at Southridge of the 4th year high school students, he came to my office and then he said, "Sir, may I talk to you?" And then his face was kind of, serious, like stoic, walang feeling. And I was like nervous or worried. And then I put down everything. I always have this rule that I put down everything in favor of listening to my students. And then he tells me, "Sir, you know what? Over the weekend, we attended this party in this school in the South. Of course, we won't mention the name of the school." And then he said, "Sir, guess what?" He goes, "Remember the story of Sagada?" Which I told, by the way, the teachers who were in yesterday's seminar, no? The Sagada story wherein they freely, publicly sell marijuana to everyone. No? And since the students called me Choots, short for tutor pa kasi yung time na yon, they thought it was Jutes and they were looking for marijuana. Okay? But going back to my story, the boy, Joaquin, asks me this question: "Sir, do you remember your story to us about Sagada?" And I was more nervous. Yes. Okay. Sir, in that party, okay, there was this room in the house where they actually smoke marijuana. And you have to go there para hindi mo mabother yung mga tao na ayaw mag-smoke ng marijuana. And I said, okay. And then they go, "Sir, they offered us marijuana." Okay. So, patagal na nabitin na ako, na medyo na-upset na ako. Okay, so what happened? "Sir, okay, tell me now." And they said, "Sir, we did not accept it." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you." Of course, I said, I'm proud. Because I was telling them that story. Remember the story when the boys were offered marijuana in Banawe, in Sagada, and all of them said no. And this particular boy, my former student who's passed away already, said no. And they said no. I said, wow, proud mentor moment for me. Because that story that I told to them when they were in grade 7, it left a mark. And he actually remembered that these boys in 4th year at the time said no. Okay? But then again, the story doesn't end that way. I saw the mom of this boy preparing for the parent get together. And I called the mom. I said, Mrs. So and so, I have to tell you something. But my face was serious. And then the boy was still there. I said, oh, your son pala went to a get together party in this school. And I said, yes, I allowed him, Mr. Rasha, because I think it was okay naman. Okay, but I think your son has something to tell you. And then the mom, all of a sudden, looked at us and our faces were serious. And then the boy said, sir, kayo na lang. I did the same thing as what the boy did to me. Stoic face, serious. And they said, oh, they were offered marijuana. What? And then? Of course, a serious face. No? And then, what, Mr. Elsha, tell me now. They said no. Oh, sometimes you can do that to the parents too. Okay, I don't know if you can do that in your own school, but well, I did it in Southridge back then. And the mom, of course, said, I'm so proud of you, my son. My point is that story stayed with them. And that's how important the impact of our story is to our students. That is why don't forget this proverb, my dear teachers. It is important for us to remember this also. The stories are a powerful structure for organizing and transmitting information and for creating meaning in our lives and our environment. Very clear, my dear teachers, and all of us agree. And so therefore, let's go into the nature of stories. This second part of my talk, the nature of stories, so that you get to know, no? What about stories, no? Okay, stories can bring abstract principles to life by giving them concrete form. Mr. Ansha, ano ibig mong sabihin? What do you mean by bring abstract principles to life by giving them concrete form? Okay, ganito lang yan, my dear teachers. When we talk about a certain lesson to our students, we are actually bringing something abstract to them at the beginning, okay? And then they will have to learn from it by making it concrete. I'll give you a concrete example. In our lesson on freedom, okay, we talked about what freedom is. Of course, the definition of freedom is, sir, freedom is doing whatever you want without limitations. And I said, well, that's a common definition that people can agree on. Pero, can you actually do that in reality? Sige nga, do whatever you want in the classroom. Sir, I can actually put water on this paper and I can, hit the ceiling. Have you ever experienced that, my teachers? Huh? Yung tipong pagdating mo sa classroom, bakit ang daming papel na nakadikit to sa ceiling? Kasi gustong-gustong gawin yan ng mga bata. But, yes, you can do that. Pero you suffer the consequences. Kasi vandalism. Sir, di ba I'm free? I can do whatever. Aha. So for them, there's an abstract principle about freedom. Okay? And then you can tell them, freedom is not absolute, gentlemen. Okay? And sir, so the laws and the rules that you have in school make us not free. So therefore, sir, we are not free. So abstract sa kanila yung freedom, the principle of freedom, and no freedom if you have laws. But then you have to make it concrete to them by telling them na, oh, no, gentlemen, this is what happens. You are free, okay? Because you do the things that are in accordance to the nature of man. And what is the nature of man, sir? Doing good. And so therefore, if you do good, you are fulfilling the purpose of freedom and the nature of man. Okay? So that is why if you run contrary to the rules and the laws of the classroom and the school, what happens? You are sanctioned because you did not fulfill the purpose. That's when they begin to concretize the whole thing. Oh, and then is there a character education? Yes, because you talk about freedom for them to be able to do good and avoid doing bad. So therefore, if you do things that are contrary to the rules of the school, you are sanctioned. So therefore, I'm not free, sir. No, you are free, because freedom is doing what is in accordance, rather, doing good in accordance to the nature of man. So yun. So, okay. So that's exactly what we're talking about. From abstract to something concrete. And in the process, we teach them character education. Now, pinilit ko ba yung character education? Hindi. Because it is part of the lesson na integrate ko. Okay? That doing good is doing things in accordance to the nature of man, therefore we are free. Okay, now, does the research tell us? Okay, now, ito, another step in our topic. So when it comes to stories, okay, stories engage our thinking, our emotions, and can even lead to the creation of mental imagery. Okay, which is true. Di ba? Pagka nagbabasa tayo, walang image. Doon tayo nagpo-form ng image. And the images, by the way, that we form is based on our own experiences. Kaya tayo nakaka-form ng image, di ba? Halimbawa, merong the character would be a boy and a girl. Naging boyfriend, girlfriend sila. Yung image na nakikita natin is based on what we have seen, what we have heard, or what we have seen in our own family, what we have seen maybe on TV, in the movies, etc. So pagka binabasa natin, nakaka-form tayo ng imagery. But then, of course, we always remember na when we engage our thinking, no, we come up with our emotions, okay, with the stories, no? And then our five senses start working. And then from the five senses, these five senses are grouped into one, made into one by our common sense. Kaya di ba many of us would tell our students, "Uy, use your head, use your common sense." I'm reminded of the story of Mr. Flores, who says he told the student says, "Teacher, teacher, teacher, I cannot open my locker." And then he teaches in prep before. He taught in prep before. And then the teacher says, Eddie, use your head, use your head. And the boy literally uses his head, no? Bumps his head in the locker. So teacher, I still cannot open it, but sakit my head. Okay, that was a very funny thing. But of course, common sense will have to be there, especially when you're older na. Because when you put all of these objects together, it becomes common sense. And the common sense now will transfer it to the imagery, which will be our imagination. And the imagination transfers it to memory. Okay? That is why it's dangerous for our kids to look into pornography, because that pornography, that object, the picture that they see in pornography will be retained in their imagination because of the use of the five senses, common sense, the imagination, and then memory. And then that's why also all of these process, okay, are happening because we are rational beings. So the rational will have to be there. But if it isn't there, like when we sleep, by the way, the rational is turned off. Kaya tayo nananaginip, di ba? That's why we have dreams. And in our dreams, we can do anything that we want because the rational is off. Nakakalipad tayo. Ba't tayo nakakalipad sa panaginip natin? Kasi naka-off yung rational. But when we are awake and the rational is wide awake as well, hindi na tayo makakalipad, di ba? Subukan mong tumalon sa third floor ng inyong mga classrooms. Noeline, oh, thank you so much. Yes, sure, why not? Okay, and thank you for that comment. So therefore, what happens to stories is that they're stored in our imagination, in our memory. But keep in mind, pag wala po masyadong experience yung mga bata, hindi natin sila pwedeng pabasahin ng mga books which does not contain pictures. Kaya nga 'di ba yung pinag-usapan ng mga experts kanina, they have to have pictures because based on those pictures, as they get older, doon nila mare-recall yung kanilang mga imagination on how it is to be afraid, how it is to be happy, how is it to be surprised. So that is why stories are very important, because we need to help them learn from those experiences also. Okay, books are very important. Okay, and narratives are very important. That's why you have the parables, you have the fables, and you have short stories and so forth and so on. Okay, what does research say? Okay, tama ba yung slide ko? Yes, tama. Okay, there you go. Okay, so here our individuals listening to stories. Okay, this is also very important to remember, my dear teachers. React to them almost automatically, participating in a sense in the actions of the narrative. You know, very important ito. Yung reaction ng mga bata, lalo na pagka naririnig nila yung kwento, medyo either happy, either tragic. But you know what's interesting? I don't know if you experience this, my dear teachers. When you start telling them stories, the first question that they ask you, Sir, sino yan? I don't know if you've experienced that. Sir, the who. Who are you referring to? And I always tell them, guys, that's not my point. My point is not the moral of the story. Let me share this fast lang, my dear teachers. You know, when I had a per-dev class, per personal development class, face-to-face 2 years ago, my class was disrupted. Kasi merong one of the students would raise his hand, you know, halos siya na lang palaging nag-dominate ng klase. Ang dami niya mga comments and all. So makikita mo yung mga klase, nagbulong-bulungan na, bulong-bulungan, nagsip-sip, ano ba yan? Ba yan, ang arte, whatever, and so forth and so on. So I had to stop the class. Again, teachable moment. I have to stop the class. And then you know what I told them? I said, you guys are a batch. You are a batch. And so therefore, kung isa man sa inyo ang mawala, hindi kayo kumpleto. I'm telling you, kahit yung kinaiinisan nyo. Kasi mamimiss nyo kayo ang isa't isa. Oh, true enough, nung nagkaroon ng, kasi in the middle, I remember in March, nagkaroon ng lockdown. So yun, sir, we miss school, sir, we miss my classmates, etc., etc. Ayan, tuloy. But before that, let me continue my story. I told them about my story of my first batch, which I told yesterday. By the way, I have a first batch and my last batch of advisory class in 4th year high school in Southridge. The story goes this way. They have graduated. Fast forward, nag-graduate na sila. One of them wanted to take up law. He already has a child, a son, and they're not married with a girl. And he decided to take up law. He stayed at, if I'm mistaken, UP, and stayed in one of the in the province. No, he stayed in one of the dormitories. And tragedy happened. Tragedy struck, my dear teachers. He was murdered. He was murdered inside his room. And hindi pa alam until now, I think, who the killer is. And that was like how many years ago? I was still, I think I was still teaching in Southridge at the time. And so what happened? Kinuwento ng mga estudyante, ng mga estudyante ko, my advisory class, when I got there to the wake, my class president, Jingoy Fernando, said, Sir, sorry, the dad of the one who passed away talked to me. And I said, Mr. Ransha, you know what? When my son was murdered, we were not here in the Philippines. We were in the US and really, really, really sad. And then I said, oh, so if you were there, who took care of who took care of everything? You know what the parents told me? Your students took care of everything. You know, my advisory class took care of everything. Jingoy Fernando, the class president, took care of everything. And I was so proud. Kaya lang, of course, I didn't want us to have that get together at the time when one of my students is actually there lying in the coffin. But I had to accept that reality, and I was proud of my students. And I had to talk to Jingoy and say, Jingoy, wow, I'm so proud of you. This is proud class advisor moment. And then you know what? After I told the story, one of my students in that grade 11 class of personal development was crying. No, he was like, and then I said, what's wrong with you? And then he said a bad word. He said, PI, sir, PI. I thought he was saying a bad word to me. And then I said, what is it? Sir, no, sir, it's not for you. Sir, I was so touched with the story, and I promise all of you guys, immediate reaction to my story. Said, I promise all of you guys that if something happens to you, I will take care of you. And we were all like, oh, silence, no? That you cannot hear a pin drop. Or maybe you can even hear that pin drop lamp, but there was silence. And we were all looking at each other and they were all like, sir, may we have a group hug? And then they all hugged this boy who cried. And that was the teachable moment. And I'm glad I stopped my lesson just for that, because they learned something from my story. And that's very important to remember. Students are awake, following along, wanting to find out what happens next and how the story ends. By the way, have you ever used this technique for them to stay quiet and for them to look forward to your next class, the next meeting? Let me share this with you. You know, I have this story which I call the Barbie doll story. Okay? It's about actually version ko to, pero it's originally called the Pink Table story. But then ayokong associate sa copying, no, na sir, alam na namin yan eh. So iniiba ko. So ang ginawa ko, Barbie doll story. It's about a boy who was born, no, and then later on when he was first 1 year old, and then the boy wanted a Barbie doll. And then the dad said, oh, no, I'll give you something else, no, a toy truck. Then 7 years old, what do you want, my son? I want a Barbie doll, dad. I said, no, I'll give you a basketball. Okay? And then, why do you want a Barbie doll? Okay? And then as soon as the boy says, Dad, I want a Barbie doll because, and then I tell the students, okay guys, you listen to the next part 2 in the next meeting. And then, sir, no. Oh, but they like it because they actually look forward to the next meeting. Next meeting, I tell the story towards the end, of course, and then tell them, okay, he was in high school, he graduated from high school, and what did he want? A Barbie doll. Why? Before he could say it, ayun, next, wait for the next one. Sir, di ba nasabi na niya? Hindi niya nasabi kasi he wanted to graduate from college. So, third part, and then he couldn't say it. Okay, kasi namatay siya. Yun yung third part, yun sa original story. But then, I came up with a fourth part. So, third part, hindi pa siya actually namatay. Na-aksidente siya. No? Sasabihin na niya na he was on the phone, no? He was in a car. And then said, Dad, the reason why I want a Barbie doll is because na-crash siya. No? Pero buhay siya. Okay, so yun yung version ko. Nabuhay siya. And then on the fourth part, this is what happened. So nasa hospital bed siya. And he said, why do you want a Barbie doll? I'll give it to you na. Kasi maghihingalo na siya. And then he said, Dad, I want a Barbie doll because that's when he dies. And then the boys are like, sir, what? OMG. He's like, no way. We don't know the answer. And then you know what I tell them? I tell them, you know what happened to him? He went to heaven. And you know what? All of us should achieve that so that when you get to heaven, you find out why. Why he wanted a Barbie doll. And you see the power of the story. But then there's a lesson, a character education that I injected at the end. Because I told them we all have to get to heaven to find out the answer. And they're all like, sige sir, yeah, we now want to go to heaven. Ang babaw ng reason, pero you're able to inject something that is important, which is character education for them to want to go to heaven. Okay? So, yun yung mga strategies. Teachers, okay? What are the purpose of the stories, by the way? Number one, remember this. Okay, number one, sparking student interest. You've heard this yesterday regarding the spark that we have to inject in our students. The question is, ano yung spark na yun? Pwede yung story na ginamit ko, yung open-ended, tapos nagkaroon ng part 2, part 3, then part 4 nag-end. It sparks the student's interest. Okay? And there is an character formation that you add at the end of the story. Is that how they get the spark? Because when they get that spark, oh boy, you will be like Mr. Gardner because you are able to train and mentor number 22. This is how number 22 looks like, by the way. Okay, next, we have number 2. Okay, leading the flow of lectures. Now, again, you have to make sure that you are able to connect your lesson with your activity. Okay, like for example, I told you I'm teaching per dev. And in that class, when we talk about emotions, I actually allowed them to showcase the emotion that they are feeling at the moment, but through pantomime. That's the other strategy that you can make good use of, my dear teachers. It doesn't have to be a per dev class. You can use it in your advisory class and tell them, how do you feel? You know, in Northfield, we have this Padlet. I don't know if you're familiar with Padlet. Each morning they write how they feel. Good morning, sir. I'm happy today. I'm sad. I'm tired, etc. And then you look at those Padlets or ask, or you don't even, if you don't have Padlets, you just ask them, how do you feel now? How do you feel today? Sir, I feel sad. They don't even have to say it first. Show me, okay, how you're feeling. Eh di syempre sa ano, pantomime, no? You have to teach them, by the way, what pantomime is or show them a video para alam nila. This is, of course, acting without making a sound and using your facial expression. Of course, there's hand gestures. Pero mahirap yung hand gesture kasi naka-online tayo. But they can use their facial expression to show how they feel. And then the students guess, oh, you feel happy today. That's good. Why do you feel happy? Process. Again, teachable moment, my dear teachers. Next, after aiding the flow of your lectures, you can actually make the material memorable. You know how, you know, in my experience lang, of course, it will all depend on what subjects you teach. But in my experience, every time I talk about love, crushes, relationships, dun sila nagkakaroon ng memorable experience. In fact, I tried to connect it to number 4, which is overcoming student resistance or anxiety. Nawawala yung mga anxiety nila and resistance to learning because we talk about love. And this is what I was telling you about. No, C.S. Lewis talked about the 4 types of love. It is there, no, the eros, storge, philia, and agape. Of course, we all know agape. Agape is the highest form of love. But then we have 2 schools of thought. No? Meron nagsasabi na agape is just for the love for God. But then some schools of thought would say, well, it's an unconditional love. So you can actually put your parents there in agape. Okay? So, but then what's important is that when you talk about this, nagigising yung mga estudyante natin, no? At least estudyante namin. Gising na gising sila. Pero it will be up to you now kung ano yung mga lessons that will make them remember. Okay? And on my part nga, it doesn't have to be the lesson. It could be the stories that you connect to the lessons that they remember. And in the process, they remember the lesson. So it's very important, my dear teachers, that we actually make our class interesting. Now, this is our logo, no, the vibrant Navy SEALs for grade 11. Building rapport between the instructor and the students or among students themselves. Remember, ito, forced namin ito. Remember the story I told you about the nesty? Okay, in our class in grade 11, we talk about the Navy SEALs trivia. Okay, it is based on our own initiative. From the initiative of the class officers. Tap your class officers, my dear teachers. In order for you to have this kind of interaction, tap your school officers, class officers, and find out what activity they want in terms of interacting. Ayoko kasing mag-impose kasi at my age now, baka hindi nila gusto. Yung tipong, sir naman, hindi na bagay sa amin yan. Yung mga ganon. So I let them. And then they were the ones who decided to have this nesty, the trivia, okay, the Navy SEALs trivia. And then every time we meet on Thursday after advisory, we actually discuss a theme, like favorite movie, and then they actually exchange. And then dun mo makikita yung values nila, yung kanilang, what they believe in, what they like, what movies they like. And then you can process it later on. Diba ang ganda, my dear teachers? And this is not, in fact, part of the class. This is outside of the class that you get to meet with them and discuss this so-called trivia. And okay, I now proceed to the last one, number 6, teach values and form characters. We add the number 6 because in this manner, okay, we are able to, again, support what we have talked about right from the start. That is, educate them in character. And how do we do that? The examples I've given you so far, that's how we can do it. Okay, today they are readers, but tomorrow they are leaders. Okay. A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only 1 life. It's very true. Okay, that's why here are some tips that I'd like to share with you. Okay, number one tip. Have a folder or notebook, okay, in order for you to keep those stories that you have in mind. My dear teachers, I do that. I keep my stories. This is the notebook that I have where I keep my stories. Hindi niyo pala makikita. But just the same, I have, by the way, I have a co-teacher in Southridge who keeps his jokes in his notebook. Para pagka ano, dun niya binabasa, sabi nga namin sa kanya, come up with your joke book. Kaya lang sabi niya, hindi na kasi original yung mga jokes niya. That's why he doesn't want to make a book out of it. Make a habit of clipping relevant newspaper stories. Of course, this is not anymore as applicable as before. Okay, but then again, my suggestion is make notes about events that are perfect illustrations. You know what I do? I watch a lot of YouTube videos, but not those kinds of videos na um, I don't want to call it nonsense, but maybe something that I don't really like to watch. No, ganun na lang. Okay. But what I do watch would be some interesting notes. Like, for example, I don't know if you're aware of how we call the people in the US who think of themselves as entitled. We call them Karen. Okay, just in case you don't know that. Kaya pag nakakita kayong Karen, I hope walang Karen dito sa ating Zoom meet right now. Huh? And then I get to know a lot of information from YouTube with regard to those things. No? Like, for example, are you aware that there has been a cheating incident in the entrance exam in the US? And it involved two famous Hollywood personalities, but I don't think you know them. Si Lori Loughlin and Felicity Hoffman. Felicity Hoffman is married to another Hollywood actor, uh, William H. Macy. And anong involvement nila? By the way, Lori is married to Mossimo. If you're familiar with the brand, Mossimo. They cheated. They paid the people who were in charge for proctoring the entrance exam in the US and famous schools. And they paid them $15,000 to $500,000. And see, teachable moment. I told my students this because I told them, look, what happens? Kayo, nagpapakahirap. Tapos itong mga tao to, nagbabayad lang. When there could have been several students who would have taken their places. So napakagandang mga teachable moments which we can share to our students. And then you can actually make good use of stories from fiction, especially well-known fiction. Okay, yesterday I told you about the Renaissance man, which actually are real people, but you can actually talk also about people who are not, who are well-known but are fictional. Okay, and next, okay, example, Aesops Fable, and so forth and so on. Now, allow me to give you suggestions when you find and select stories. Let's begin with number one. Okay, I'll give you some examples. Now, books to teach kindness. These are just some suggestions. You can take note of it, or you can forgo it and maybe just look into what I am showing you, and maybe just get ideas from these examples. Okay, so for preschool and early grades, we have Stand in My Shoes, kids learning about empathy, those shoes. Kindness is cooler, Mr. Mrs. Ruler. Okay, kindness is cooler, Mrs. Ruler. And then, what does it mean to be kind? Ordinary Mary's extraordinary deed, each kindness, and then the invisible boy and heart prints. Again, those are just suggestions. You may take note of them or you can skip them. Charlotte's Web for middle school. You know, this is a beautiful story, again, made into a movie. And they say that when you let your son or your children this story, you know what happens? They don't get afraid of the spiders, according to them. Me, after reading the book, I still get afraid of spiders. And then, of course, wonder and kindness, a treasury of Buddhist wisdom, children and parents. And then for the teens, Freak the Mighty, and then Rules. And then there are books about bullying, which you can search. For preschool, we have Chrysanthemum, The 100 Dresses, Eduardo, the horriblest boy in the whole wide world, and Say Something, Baby Mouse, Queen of the World, Bully Beans, Confessions of a Former Bully, Chrysanthemum, Middle Ages. You now have Stitches, To This Day for the Bullied and the Beautiful, Understanding Body, Loser, etc. Okay, I hope you don't mind if I move fast because I still have a lot to discuss with everyone. Okay, some tips to help children fall in love with reading. Number one, model good reading behavior. Unfortunately, why did I have to put this? Kasi nowadays, my dear teachers, mukhang kulang na ito. Okay, mukhang ano na ito model good reading behavior pero in front of the screen. If kids see you reading, they will be more likely to pick up a book for themselves. But I hope if you still do have books at home, like I discovered my grade 11 students last year, boy, oh boy, they have so many reading materials pala at home. That is the reason why we decided to put up my favorite book. Remember, I told you yesterday, which you can actually make good use of it in this seminar, that it's one of the techniques. You can ask your students, what is your favorite book? And then they present it during advisory class. And it's so nice because they themselves are the ones who come up with the slides. Ang ganda kasi tinuturuan mo na sila on how they are going to summarize the book. At the same time, they make their own slides. I'm telling you, mas magaling pa sila sa akin. Okay, reading out loud helps kids bring the words to life. You know, I was wondering before when I was a kid in grade 5, I remember my teacher would usually tell us, okay, groups of 5, groups of 7, okay, punta na kayo sa harap, ikaw, volunteers. And then when we stand in front, we will be reading together a certain selection. And then I was like wondering, why are we doing this? Yung pala, it has its purpose. Kasi when you get to read out loud, you get used to speaking the language. And I'm very thankful for my teacher at Letran. Now, Miss Alarcon, I don't know if she's still alive, but because of her, I get to speak this way because I'm Bisaya. No, I'm Bisaya. And people, when I talk to people and I tell them I'm Bisaya, they are like, what? No, we don't believe you. Di kami naniniwala. No? But because of her, I'm able to read and talk this way. And I remember when we were reading, and then I was absent kasi the previous day, and then there was a word that was Illinois, di ba? Illinois, okay? And then I said, Illinois. And then she goes, wait, who said that? Who said that? Who said Illinois? Di ba I told you in a previous meeting? It's Illinois, it's silent S. And then I was pretending to be, ikaw yata yun. Ikaw yata. But I'm very thankful for her because I learned so much from her doing this. No, all reading is good reading. Let's let kids know that. Create a reading nook. You know, in Southridge before, we have this reading nook inside the classroom. And we have an activity that we call DEAR, what we call DEAR, or drop everything and read. I don't know if that's still applicable now because wala na yata mga books. But then again, maybe those who have tablets, we can still have that, no? Drop everything and read. Okay, now read with friends. A book club. I'm very happy to tell you that in Northfield, we have a book club, even if it's online. Okay, we have a book club, and it's actually facilitated. The moderator is my former student from Southridge, okay, who stays in Lantaka, and I'm very happy that he is the one who spearheaded the whole activity. Okay, keep books around. If there's always a book within reach, kids will be more likely to pick it up. Okay, but again, no, let's try our best. If we have still books, sadly, no, National Bookstore, when I go there, wala na masyadong books available. Okay, but if you ask them, they can actually look for it and they can order it for you. Hindi na kagaya dati na nandun ka agad. A gift that keeps giving. Very important, my dear teachers. Friends and family can give the gift of books for birthday or holiday. You know what? When I was a kid, someone gifted me with this book titled The Little Prince. How many of you have actually read this book? Very beautiful. Why? Because it gives us different points of view from the age that we actually read it. I read it in grade 5, and I saw myself siding with the Little Prince. And then, why? Because I couldn't understand the adults. Okay, I agreed with the Little Prince. When I got to high school, I was in the middle. When I got to teach in Southridge and I read it again, why, I'm telling you, my perspective was already that of the adults. Ako na, hindi ko na naintindihan si Little Prince. Ba't ganito? Ba't ka nagganyan? Ba't ka nag-observe? Ba't ka nagganito? Whatever, nagdo-drawing. But when I was a kid, I was like, oh nga, ano, I don't know if you're familiar with the Little Prince, but there is a character in the Little Prince wherein there is this man who switches on and off and on and off and on and off the lights. Kasi nga maliit lang yung planet niya. And I'm reminded of people who actually don't have time for themselves, who don't have time to rest. By the way, we will have our wellness break next week. So I'm very happy. So therefore, these people Okay, so I don't understand them. But when I started working, I was like, oh no, I don't have time for myself. Mukhang naintindihan ko na itong tao. Second thing that I'd like to share with you is the value of friendship. The value of friendship, which I think you can teach your students about. You don't even have to let them read the book. You can just choose the pages, and I'll teach you what we call the, uh, uh, oh gosh, it will be the next slide. Okay, so, but the second thing that I learned from the Little Prince is the value of friendship. Remember that portion wherein the Little Prince saw the fox, said, "What are you? I'm a fox. Could you be my friend?" The fox says, "Oh, no, you cannot." "Why not?" "Because I'm wild. But you have to tame me in order for me to be your friend." That's true in real life. Wala naman yata tayo naging kaibigan na biglang instant kaagad. Na nakita natin sa, "Uy, I want you to be my friend. Can you be my friend?" Totoo yan sa mga lower levels, di ba? Friends sila. Pero notice, as they get older, hindi na sila nagiging friends. Magkakilala na lang sila. But that's very true. And that's what the Little Prince can teach our students. And of course, the third one, it is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Wow, beautiful. I mean, come on. If that is not something that they can learn from in terms of character education, I don't know what one is. That's why this book is so beautiful. You can actually, if you are not yet, you're not yet teaching this to your students, then please do so. This is what I wanted to share with you. Shared inquiry. No? Ang maganda sa shared inquiry, may plus points and minus points. Shared inquiry, okay? You don't have to actually read the whole book in order for you to have shared inquiry. As what I said, sa Little Prince, you can just choose a portion. You can just choose a portion in which the fox and the Little Prince met each other so that you can talk about the value of friendship. Okay? And then you have a leader. And the leader will be the one who will ask a question. But before he asks the question, he makes sure that everyone gets to read the selection. 1 or 2 pages lang yan. And then, kasi, hindi nila maintindihan, they cannot share if they are not able to read. So kahit na ginawa mo siyang homework, pwede niyo pa rin siyang pabasahin. Read it again, no? Read it again in class. And then discuss only the selection everyone has read. Support your ideas with evidence from the selection. Ang kagandahan nito, malalaman mo talaga na nabasa niya because once he starts talking or she starts talking, she will have to make sure na may support doon sa selection na binigay mo. Doon mo malalaman na hindi ka nagbasa, no? Saan yung proof mo? Where is your proof? Sir, nandito. Okay, listen to other participants and respond to them directly. And expect the leader to only ask questions. What's the downside here, my dear teachers? Small group lang po dapat siya. Yun ang downside. So kung meron kang 20 students, you can divide it into 2 groups. Kaya lang sana meron kang assistant teacher who can actually do the other group and you can do the other group. But this is very effective. Kasi dun mo makikita again the valuing of the students. When they start sharing their ideas, yun ang kagandahan nito. So I hope you can take note of this also and make sure that you include it as one of your techniques. And then we talk about, okay, my mouse is not functioning properly. Okay, other techniques, songs. You know what I do in PerDev? Remember what I told you? Ayaw ko yung mga theories, tapos wala na. I actually make them discover themselves. And one of them is, how do we discover about your students? You tell them, ask them about their favorite song. I don't know if you have seen the movie, that Penguin movie. I forgot the title of, remember yung when they sing and then they said, "What is your heart song?" And I got it from there. So that's why movies are a form of literature, because we get it from there. And then I asked them, "What is your heart song, my dear students?" Okay, so share with us, and then they choose. And then why did you choose that song? Makikita mo yung values nila. Again, character education in action. Oh, what about this? Na ang actually latest na nangyayari. This is very true in Southridge, by the way. I don't know in the other schools, but this is very true. Kilala na sa kanila ang spoken word poetry. You can actually ask the students, especially if you are a teacher in literature, siguro ito medyo kailangan na ng specific subject. No? Like, mahal kita, iyan ang sabi mo. Naniwala ako kahit ang sabi mo, biro lamang iyon sa iyo. Pero naniniwala pa rin ako Dahil umasa ako na hindi talaga biro ang katagang binitiwan mo. Ah, pero nagkamali ako dahil siya pala ang mahal mo at hindi ako. O, di ba? When you start telling them that and then writing their own poetry, spoken word poetry, wow, ang ganda. Makikita mo na naman yung valuing nila. Pero I think this requires an expertise in terms of the subject. Pero if you're familiar with the America's Got Talent, their final winner last year, overall winner, was actually, his talent was spoken word poetry. And the judges were saying, wow, this is the first time that we heard of it. And I told myself, oh, wow, the judges are not exposed. Buti pa tayo, exposed tayo sa spoken word poetry. Sila hindi. They didn't even know about it. Even Simon Cowell. Okay? What about this? The hugot lines. Oh, this one, I actually ask my students to do this in PerDev. Ang crush ay parang math problem. Kung hindi mo makuha, tigan mo na lang. and they actually have fun. They have fun doing it. And this coming from their own. Ayaw ko ng mga hindi original. And then that's when you get to see again the value. Okay, what they value. And then everybody loves stories. Everybody loves stories. I don't think you can argue with me on that one. Then again, this one, I can argue with people who say that movies are not a literature. There are people who say, hindi yan literature, paano mag-literature pinapanood mo? But remember, my dear teachers, before they became movies, they were screenplays. And remember at the start of this lesson, remember at the start of this seminar, I told you that literature, stories in literature, okay, are told via imagery, and the imagery that moves refer to the movies. That is why, please believe me, that movies are a form of literature that you can share with your students. But before that, let me give you some notes and important things. Okay, make sure that you actually watch the movie first. Okay, which is what I do. I'm the moderator, the Mariners Director's Chair, and I watch the movie first before I actually let my students watch. And be careful because we have to avoid, okay, which we call the oops scene. No? Oops scene, meaning hindi dapat mapanood ng mga bata. Okay? And then second, okay, make sure you set a purpose for your viewing. Okay? Kailangan may reason. Gaya later, di ba, after my seminar with you, I have my movie binge with my students. And our purpose for watching is for us to unwind and bonding among our students, which you can do, by the way, my dear teachers. Kasi mas madali nga tayo ngayon because online. And then draw attention. Okay? Draw attention to the point of the story. Okay? Tell them that this is what the story actually, or you can ask them what the story is trying to tell us, what the movie is trying to tell us. And then, ito ang pinaka-importante. Encourage your students to think critically. Critical thinking, very important. Challenge them. Remember yesterday, I told you, wag na nating hintayin na magkaroon ng challenges sa mga estudyante natin. Tayo ang magbigay ng challenge sa kanila. Because we can. Because we are teachers and we are good teachers. It's good that we are great teachers. Now, before I go into the last portion of this talk, allow me to share with you movies about teachers, which I hope can inspire you to continue being a teacher. Dangerous Minds, Dead Poets Society, Freedom Writers, and the Emperor's Club. Beautiful movies. Freedom Writers, she actually saw the talent in her students, and she decided to make them write, taught them how to write, and they came up with this journal, which they called the Freedom Writers. Dead Poet Society, he was not your typical teacher. He taught literature, but he wasn't by the book. Ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo mga teachers. We can go outside the book in order for us to be able to teach literature. He even told them to tear the pages of the books in literature, which was unusual. Okay, he was not your typical literature teacher, but the students were inspired. Towards this teacher. Dangerous Mind, the students who are not anymore they're feeling worthless. Okay, But you have this teacher, no, in the person of Michelle Pfeiffer here, who was from the Navy and was able to teach them. And he was like a PAREF teacher who would go from houses to make sure, parang nag-chat siya with the parents, and to make sure that things are okay. And the parents of the kids are like, why are you doing this, teacher? This is not usual. This is unusual. Okay, so we go outside our comfort zones to help our students. And the Emperor's Club, the teacher, taught the son of his former student who is now a senator, and he told his former student that I am going to teach your son character kasi spoiled brat. And you know what the senator said, who was his former student? He told his former teacher, oh, no, 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 no. You are not going to teach my son character. And the son was laughing. But then later on, when the son discovered how the senator cheated and how the senator was corrupt, his own dad, that's when he got disappointed. But then again, I hope you teachers will be inspired by these movies. And this is also very good to your students if you want to show them inspirational movies. I remember, if you're a PE teacher and if you're here, you can actually make good use of these movies for them to be inspired to win a ball game. I remember when I was in Southridge, the coach of the team actually asked them to watch Braveheart in order for them to be encouraged to win. And after watching, the next day they have that game and they won. So movies can move us and make us do good. So please, if you have the time, the latest one is the 12 Mighty Orphans, is 2021. The rest are old movies. But again, these are very good movies because they help us learn about life. Okay? Now let me proceed to Dear Evan Hansen. Okay, so what I did, this is the latest movie, 2021. Okay, I'm almost done, my dear teachers. But I'm sharing with you this because I asked my students. Well, for one, I actually watched this movie already. And this is a famous musical, and I think Mr. Antoy is planning to watch this play, the musical in the US. And on my part, I saw the movie, but the movie was critically panned, but I actually liked it. And one of the reasons why I didn't like the movie is because of the actor. The actor was the original actor who played the role of Ivan Hansen in the musical, but he's actually, I think, 28 years old, if I'm mistaken, or nearing 30. So, ganun naman sa US, even if there are 30, the cast of Glee, if you're familiar with Glee, they were older than teenagers, but their roles are teenagers. But for me, it doesn't matter. When I watched it, Ivan Hansen has a social disorder, something like that, antisocial disorder, something to that effect. But then he was told by his therapist to write a journal, okay, a daily, what he feels good about the day, something like that. And then I got it, and I said, okay, let's write a gratitude journal, my dear students, and let it be your daily story, okay? And then they can share it with me or whom they want to share it with. Of course, we cannot force them to tell them their story, their journal, but they can share it with me as part of their performance task. So there, from a movie, the next movie, The Breakfast Club. I don't know if you're familiar with this movie, but this movie actually paved the way for other teenage movies. And this is very good because this movie shows us the reality of the cliques, the barkada, na merong rebel, merong beauty queen, merong basket case, merong geek or the weird, the nerds rather, and you have the jocks or the varsity player. That's a reality. And yet nagsama-sama sila sa isang detention on one Saturday. In fact, the whole movie was just the whole day of their detention from morning until afternoon until they were released. But what is the beauty about this movie? You get to know about the characters and you get to relate to their characters. And when your students watch this, I think they can relate very well to maybe one of the characters because I did. No, I related to one of the characters and I was like, boy, this movie is very good. And I told my students that, this is something that you can watch and you can actually maybe watch with friends and learn from it. So there is a lot of literature in movies. Soul. Okay? One thing that I like to share with you with Soul is that part we're in, there is this great before that they say exists. Of course, it doesn't exist. It's what we know of. And then in the great before, no, number 22 was there, and he was part of the many souls. No, 1 billion na yung account, pero si 22 nandun pa rin kasi hindi siya mentor. And then while they were in the great before, there were souls playing around, no, playing around, maliliit, tulad ni number 22 that you see there. And then there was this building that crashed on them. And then Mr. Gardner, who was also a soul there, said, oh, no, the building will crush the souls. And then you know what 22 said? Oh, no, don't worry. The souls are never crushed here. That's what life on earth is all about. People crushing the soul of each other. I was like, boy, whoa, boom. I was like, teachable moment, character education. Because we actually, people try to destroy each other, pull each other down. Kaya sabi niya dito, hindi nangyayari yan. Okay? And that's a very good moment for us to learn from. And then there is a portion there that says, there are lost souls. And the lost souls are the people who are depressed, sad, they're not contented with their life. But they can be saved. And who saves them? The misfits. I was like, what? The misfits? What about the ordinary common people, the normal people? Why aren't they one? But then that's the thing. Okay, sometimes the normal ordinary people don't care about these people who are depressed, who are sad. In fact, we take them for granted. And that's a very important lesson that we learn from this movie. See what one movie can do. Ang daming character education, learning, character formation that we learn from it. And last but not the least, no, Inside Out. Oh, beautiful movie. You know why? Because it talks about emotions. It talks about what's inside a teenager. Teenagers have, Eric Erickson, you're familiar with Eric Erickson, has this so-called stages of development. And in the stages of development, there is what we call the fifth stage, which is the stage of identity confusion or identity formation. Okay, so it's either the negative or the positive. And then I ask my students, so what do you notice? Okay, the one on top, I said, are the emotions of the father. The one below is the emotions of the mother. And then the one there on the left would be the emotions of Riley, who is the daughter. Okay, what do you notice? And then they were all like, sir, the same, ganyan, until somebody said, oh, sir, I noticed something. All of the emotions of the father are all male. All the emotions of the mother were all female. While the emotions of Rayleigh, combination of male and female. And then why is that so? Kasi at that age, confused pa yung bata. Wala pa siyang identity. He's still forming her identity. Kaya ganun, sabi ko, ang galing ng Pixar. Ang galing. I was like, we learned from this. Sa movies, that's why whoever will tell me that movies are not a literature, I'm sorry. I beg to disagree. We can learn so much with movies. And with this, I'd like to end my story by telling you from my own experience what we can do. In our personal development, we have this so-called hot seat. Okay, the hot seat, for lack of a better term, is the chair where they sit on and then they talk about themselves. Teachers, mind you, this is not a bull session. This is different from a bull session. The hot seat is where you tell your classmates what we don't know about you. And then no judgments. Well, bawal ang judgmental. The students will just listen and then let him talk and talk and talk, and walang sasabihin yung mga classmates na, hindi. I beg to disagree. Quiet and listen and let him tell his story. And you know what? I discovered some things. 2 years ago when it was online, when it was face-to-face, there were students who actually claimed, guys, I may be happy when I go to school, but I'm actually sad. No, I'm angry because I'm the eldest. I do everything. My parents told me to do this, do that, etc. Tapos turuan yung mga kapatid mo ng lessons nila kasi alam mo na yan, etc. But you actually say that we're okay. I'm okay. You think that I'm okay, but I'm not. I am suffering from inside. And he started crying. And then after that, the classmates hugged him and told him, we don't know. We didn't know. So we learn from among each other. But then again, this has to be controlled. Hindi ito pwedeng maging bull session. Hindi ito pwede yung tipong, ako galit ako sa inyo. Galit ako sa iyo. Ano sabihin, kayo, inaapi niyo ako, binubuli niyo ako. Walang ganun. It has to be coming from their own experience, freewheeling. And I've tried it and it's been successful, even online. Even online. And it's a teachable moment. It's character education. Like recently online, one last, the student, Lorenzo, as well, he's not his real name. Okay, he talked about his leadership capabilities. And then he says, I'm supposed to be a leader. I didn't know I couldn't do this. I feel so frustrated, but now I know. And people learn from it. It's like, oh nga no. Pero hindi, that's not how we see you. But then there was an exchange. Okay, an exchange of ideas, an exchange of stories. And you can do this as part of your techniques. So my dear teachers, I hope I was able to teach you, not teach you, but at least I hope I was able to um, cascade to you, pay it forward. The things that you can practice in your own school, because these are the things that I have experienced myself, and I was successful in transferring literature and making sure literature becomes a teachable moment. Stories that we tell are the stories that they remember, but always remember that we give time to tell them stories because we want them to be formed.